Hello and welcome back, it's Shrike here with another D&D video. Today we're going to go through 5 very common mistakes that DMs make when they're designing and running dungeons. Dungeons are a massive staple in the game Dungeons & Dragons. It's even in the name, so it really sucks when your dungeons don't go as you planned and don't really hit as much as you wanted them to. So in this video, hopefully we will be able to remove some common mistakes that you might be making, as well as loads of other Dungeon Masters out there. But before we get onto that, I just want to let you know that I upload Dungeons & Dragons content here on YouTube every Monday and Thursday. So subscribe if you want to improve your game, and make sure to hit the notification bell so you get notified when I upload a new video. So let's kick it off with the first reason, which is the theme of the dungeon. And I think this is something that a lot of Dungeon Masters just completely forget to even think about when they're designing a dungeon. They just put in the corridors, the rooms, the puzzles, traps, monsters, whatever else they're going to put in this dungeon, but they don't give it a theme. But by giving your dungeon a theme and carrying out throughout the whole dungeon really gives it more depth. For example, if the theme you're going for is that this dungeon is a lost fortress of a very old battle, then make sure throughout the whole dungeon to put relics of this old battle. It will really bring the dungeon alive, and the players will have much more fun interacting with the bits in it. And the theme could be anything really. It could be that it's a shipwreck and it's all haunted and you go for the whole horror theme, or it could be that it's a crazed old wizard and it's all a bit more funny, a bit more silly. But by giving it a theme and then following that out throughout the whole dungeon, it will definitely improve the feel of your dungeon. And that also quite nicely fits into number 2, which is the reason that your players are actually in the dungeon. I think this is actually one of the biggest factors as to why the players would enjoy your dungeon. If the players and their characters aren't actually invested in why they're in there and what they're trying to achieve, it's just not going to fit right. But if the reason they're in there is intertwined into one of their backstories, or there's an NPC that they're really invested in has pushed them in this direction, they're much more likely to actually enjoy the dungeon and make more of it. And then you can use this reason throughout the whole dungeon as well. You can throw in some red herrings, you can throw in some extra information they gain, and you can even make it that they don't get the payoff in the end. And what I mean by that is if they're there, for example, to go and free a NPC that's been captured, they could get to the end of the dungeon and realise that that NPC isn't actually there and has recently been transported somewhere else. You don't want to do that too much because it can get annoying, but doing it once will just make them go in the direction to actually free the NPC, and it makes them even more invested to go to that dungeon. But even if you don't do that and the NPC is there and they're saved, it's also a really good moment for your players to feel relieved that they have managed to do it. So this third one is more about the layout of the dungeon, and it's to try and make less empty space. This is something I see very commonly when people are designing dungeons. There are very long corridors that have nothing in them. There are rooms which have nothing in them. Try to make sure that everywhere in the dungeon there's something that the players can interact with. It's not fun for a player to go into a room and just be described that there's 2 chairs there and there's nothing going on, and then they just have to either choose left or right, and then they go right down a long corridor that has nothing in it into another room which also has nothing in it. It's just not very fun. A good example of how to do this correctly is Castle Ravenloft from the campaign The Curse of Strahd. Castle Ravenloft is pretty big, but every single room and every single corridor has something in it that just adds to the story. And it means that the players can actually interact with it, and they enjoy it much more. I don't know about you, but I've played in games where you've gone through a dungeon and you've gone down a corridor, got to a T-junction and have to choose left and right, but you don't really have a reason to go one way or the other. Why not have some noise down one way or a faint light emitting down the other way, and actually give them a reason to go one way or the other, rather than just saying, just pick left or right, because that is not fun. So now we spoke about having less empty space in your dungeon, let's go on to number 4, which is talking about the environment. And a specific mistake that a lot of Dungeon Masters make is the verticality and having it all just on one level. This is also just a really good tip of how to make your combat more interesting as well. It's much more interesting if there's verticality and there's some people which are up on a ledge and then there are some people which are down on the ground with your players. You can do this in your dungeons as well. You can have a rocky outcrop that some NPCs or monsters could be on, or even if it's a building, you could have a balcony or a cupboard that something's on top of. And also talking about the environment, instead of having actual mechanical man-made traps, you could have the environment as a trap in itself. The environment can actually be quite dangerous just in real life, so why not put that into your dungeons as well? Or maybe have a cave-in about to happen, or have a fire start. And then see how your players deal with that. It's a little bit different than a trap. You can also use the environment to help with number 1, which was the theme of the place. And then the final point that I want to bring up is giving the NPCs in the dungeon a personality. If the dungeon is just filled with beasts or monstrosities that don't actually have intelligence, then this might not apply, but if it has any creatures that have any sort of intelligence, make sure to give them a personality. It's much more interesting for highwaymen to actually have a personality rather than just being something to hit, or even when you come to stuff like mind flayers, giving them a bit of a twinge, a bit of a personality, just makes it a bit more interesting. And I don't think it happens enough. There's quite a lot of times where you get into combat or you have interactions with creatures and it's just not there. But by having that personality, that might make that character an integral part to the campaign. There's been quite a few times in my games where I've given a evil NPC a bit more personality, and I didn't plan for them to have anything to do with the campaign story, but the players ended up absolutely hating them, so I used that as an opportunity to make them part of the big bad's plan. And it just really adds to the story and makes the players much more invested because they really hate that person, so they really want to go and kill them. I do plan on doing a whole video about personality of NPCs, so make sure to subscribe if you want to see that when it comes out. So there you have it, there are 5 common mistakes that people make when designing dungeons for Dungeons & Dragons. If you found this helpful, please do give it a like, it helps my channel, and if you want to see more content like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And before you go, if you have any additional tips that you think players might help, go and put them down in the comments, and then other people who are watching this video, go down to the comments and see what other people are saying as well. But until next time, happy gaming!